work-life balance, is that even a thing with everything that we're talking about? Do you believe in work-life balance? Is that something that you think is achievable, or do you think we're always in flux and it's never actually as achievable as people make it out?
I mean, I think it's just a really strange idea when you start to think about it. I think it's often well-meaning, and that feeling that your life is balanced in some sense is absolutely a sort of legitimate thing. But I think very often what it really gets communicated as, or how people hear it, is as extra pressure, right? As a desire to sort of be 100% in the work realm and also 100% in the realm outside work. In fact, I think something more useful is a sense of like seasonality, right? There may be times in your life when being imbalanced in the direction of work is the right approach, and other times when being imbalanced in the direction of life outside work is the right approach, and that is actually balance over the long haul. So I think it's a little bit arbitrary, right? I think the question should be, given your situation, given the world we live in, given the pressures that are on all of us, how far are you managing to sort of spend a pretty big chunk of your day doing things that really sort of absorb you and make you feel more alive? And it kind of doesn't matter whether they are work or non-work, provided that that's part of a sort of, financially sustainable situation and everything. So I've sort of left the notion behind, but maybe not the spirit of it.
So how, for you personally, do you bring this into your life, into a concept? So the done list was one thing that we spoke about, but for many people listening to this who are starting to relate to this concept, what for you has been quite significant in this approach, and what do you do daily that kind of helps you stick with this?
So, I mean, I think I'm probably at an extreme end in terms of the amount of autonomy that I have over my work time, not the time around the sides of work, because we've got a 7-year-old and there are all sorts of things that just, it's the rhythm of the house. But there is this chunk of the day, every weekday, when I really do get to call the shots. And I do appreciate that's not true for everybody, but it's usually truer for people than they think to a certain extent. And I think the principles underlying it are more widely applicable. So one of the things that I do is I try really hard to concentrate the kind of core work that I do, the thing that is the central value of it, which is writing and to some extent reading and thinking and walking around, thinking about things. I do a lot of writing in the form of walking, into a kind of a 3 or 4 hour chunk of the working day. So I try quite hard to ring fence that time, but I also don't try very hard to ring fence or defend the rest of the time. So there's a sort of natural movement from the degree to which I can control my time and my focus, and then the part of the day where I'm kind of not even trying and I'm just rolling with whatever, answering emails, getting calls, serendipitous stuff is happening. And I think that is I write about that in the new book, that there's actually this pattern going back all the way through history. You look at the working patterns of artists and authors and scientists and everybody. This number, 3 or 4 hours for really deep focused work, is incredibly, it recurs again and again. And anyway, the spirit underneath this that I think is so important is just this idea of like, I'm going to work on something and then it's going to be time to stop. And it's going to be time to stop because it's time to stop, not because I have got to the end of all the things that needed doing in that slot. So this is almost like a feeling. It's very hard to describe, let alone turn into specific techniques. But it's like, it's that sense that you are moving through finite time, making some sensible choices about what to do with the finite time, and then stopping just because a new part of finite time, otherwise known as the evening or whatever, has come around. And that gradually undermines that sense of doing things the other way, where you start off in the morning by thinking, what are all the things that need to get done by the end of today? Instantly, you're going to come up with a list that is got no relationship to your actual amount of time or energy. And then you're just going to feel bad about yourself when you only get 1/5 of the way through it by the end. So it's almost like, to me, and maybe this is getting weird and obscure now, but to me, this feeling is almost like sort of walking into a strong wind, right? It's like when you're out on the hills and there's like a wind blowing in your face and you're just it doesn't stop you moving forward, but you're sort of moving in this deliberate way through some things, writing them on a done list when you've done them, hopefully, because then you can sort of appreciate that you've done them. And it's kind of bracing, right? It's not like sort of being carried downhill on a stream or something, so that you're getting more and more and more and more done, and by the end you'll be completely done. No, it's just like, okay, I took a few paces along the path today, and I'm satisfied with that. Does that make sense, or am I just talking nonsense at this point?
No, it does make sense. The concept, I love the kind of going against the wind, because I do think sometimes people can wake up every day with a weight on their shoulders and go to bed with a weight on their shoulders. And I hear all the time in clinic or from people who write into the show that they're waking up at 3 a.m. with all their lists, and they'll have a pen and paper next to their bed and they'll write all the things they need to do. Yeah. And from what I'm hearing of you is that can create anxiety, which is also very, if I'm looking at what I'm being told or how I would also react, it does cause anxiety. This never-ending to-do list. I don't think I've known anyone that's gone, I did everything today. There's always something else to add on. But we do live in this productivity method. Like Ali Abdul has been on the show. Mm-hmm. We have had so many different people have come on and spoken about productivity. And I very much succumb into that, but I've also realized actually that I can put a lot more pressure on myself when I'm in that state. And so I think that we do live in a way in this world that is curated towards that. And going against the wind, it's kind of going against what the environment is that we're in. So what would you say to that if somebody says, well, I understand, but I feel that I'm trapped in this circuit, that there is a forever ending to-do list and I can't get away from it?
I mean, here I think I come back to this idea that it's really about seeing how irredeemable this situation is, right? So one thing that I do, although I have really downgraded the role of a to-do list in my life in the sense of here are the 20 things I must do by the end of the day, otherwise I'm not a valid person and haven't earned my right to exist. I do keep an incredibly long list, changes the form I keep it in, but basically just an incredibly long list of everything that's on my plate, everything that I might want to do, everything I said I'll potentially do, so that it's all there in this spirit of, this comes originally in my life from a book called Getting Things Done by the productivity guru David Allen, who wrote it a couple of decades ago now. This notion of just getting it all out of your head onto a list. But that list is, precisely because that list is so long, it's actually quite hard to feel anxious about it, because you look at that list and you just say, okay, this is effectively infinite, right? This is all the things that are sort of in my life. I don't, as I've sort of worked on myself in this regard, like I no longer sort of feel stressed by the sheer length of that list because it seems so long, right? Because it's clearly
unachievable.
Right. It's just a list of it's much more like a menu, in other words, right? It's much more like a menu of all the things that like I'm interested in doing. And then one of the ways that I work is maybe to take a small number of things off that list, put them onto a sort of a list of a much shorter list, where I have sort of like a fixed number of slots. So maybe there's only like 5 items that can go onto those things. And the rule is that you can't add another one until you've moved one off, right? So then you're sort of saying, okay, this is the world of things that I could do, but this is the ones that are on my plate at the moment. And all I'm going to do is put a few hours into moving them forwards. I do get that obviously people may say, well, I've just got to be able to work at this kind of hell for leather pace in my role because that's just what the job is. But it's still the case, no matter who you are, that you can't do more than you can do, right? That, like, you can't do the impossible. That's why they call it impossible. So I think in that context, it's really useful to really sort of try to feel into this sense that we are not, it's not that we've got like a bucket of tasks and it's our job to empty the bucket. It's that we're sort of swimming in an infinite ocean of tasks, and our job is to get good at swimming and swimming in the right direction and making good choices about how to swim. That metaphor sort of getting extended further than it should. But so there's something that encapsulates this for me, which I talk about a lot because it always gives me goosebumps to do so, is this line from a British-born Zen teacher called Hoon Jiu Kennet, who she died a while ago now, but she always used to say that her method of teaching was not to lighten the burden of the student, but to make it so heavy that he or she would put it down. And there's something in this that just completely connects with my whatever it is, my parasympathetic nervous system or something. You're the expert on that matter. But there's something sort of totally physiological about that idea. Okay, it's not that I have to keep struggling to the point where I don't feel burdened by all the things that could be done. It's that by understanding just how many things there will always be that could be done, I can see that it's not my job to try to lighten that burden. I can put that burden down, take a deep breath, and now decide, what would be the most important things for me to give my time and energy to. And they might be really annoying, urgent chores that people are nagging you about. That might, on a given day, be the right calculation, but not because I'm just a few days away from the moment where I'm finally in control of everything.
I love that you just said, the physiology of it makes me calm. It reduces your stress response. Your cortisol is coming down. Your parasympathetic nervous system is being activated because you realize it's kind of out of your control. And stress is our biggest killer. And I think that's why this conversation is so important, is actually if we can take control and harness our stress, we can have a happier, healthier life. And it brings me on to the question, as you were saying with that quote, is being busy without purpose. And I have found myself being stuck in a shell of busyness without actually a real purpose of why I'm busy, because I just feel like I need to be busy. And having time off, as you said, to creatively think or to allow your brain to be more open, because some of my best ideas come when I'm not sat at a desk writing.
Right, absolutely.
It's like redefining how our productivity can then align with meaningful achievements as opposed to busyness.
Yeah, no, totally. It's so easy to be in that kind of frenetic place where it almost feels like it must be useful because it's so exhausting. But there's no reason to believe that because something is very taxing of your energies that it's therefore useful or meaningful or making a difference. And just as there's no reason to believe that if something is easy and feels easy and easeful, that must mean it's worthless. But I think a lot of us are raised in some sense and imbibe from the culture this sense that, like, yes, we'd like lots of success and happiness in our lives, but what we really want is to feel like we were like good boys and girls in terms of how much effort we put in to achieving it. And I think that is one of the things that feeds that sense of like just pushing, because there's some sort of moral benefit in the sheer fact of pushing.